give you what's called the strengths equation. This is how you take a talent and you develop it as a strength in your life. So here's the equation. It's talent. So you take the assessment, you get the 5 words or the 10 words of the full 34 report. Focus on the top, not the bottom. So you take your talents and then you add some knowledge, you add some skills, you add some experience, and you get a strength. Let me say that again. Talent plus knowledge plus skills plus experience equals a strength. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Called2B Podcast, where we seek to empower everyday believers to discover and live out their authentic calling in Christ to be a greater blessing on our world today. I'm Reverend Dr. Travis Guzzi. I'm the Executive Director of Wellness and Coaching for the Southeastern District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I'm also an ICF Certified Life and Executive Coach and a Called2B Coach. And it is wonderful having all of our viewing and listening audience joining us for this Christmas edition of the Called2B Podcast. It is starting to look like Christmas here in the Called2B Podcast studio. And as always, I want to welcome our co-hosts who are with us, the Rev Kev, Pastor Kevin Scott, who is joining us virtually from Maryland, and in studio, Trish Freshwater. Good to have both of you here today. Are you guys getting ready for Christmas?
Yes, I think so. So this is an interesting year because even though my family and I have lived in what is theoretically a house before, townhouses and that kind of thing, this is the first year where we have a house that actually really feels like a house that is actually ours, that we can do whatever we want with. And so I have gone full on Clark Griswold.
Oh, nice.
I have bought lots and lots and lots of Christmas lights. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so at some point this week, when we get a day above like 45, I'm going to go out there and just see how big of a mess I can make with these lights. But we're going to light up the neighborhood, man. It's going to be a sight to behold by the time I'm done.
That's great. I've got a neighbor who's like that. It looks like the Lowell's Christmas decoration department backed up on his front yard. And every year he adds a new inflatable. I think we're on like 15 now.
Yes. There are some people. Yeah. And the Scotts, my family, we don't mess around when it comes to Christmas. We have like 4 trees that are up in varying places in our houses. But I mean, this year, though, really, like, we've got competition in the neighborhood, right? The guy across the street thinks he's going to be brighter than me. And I say, no, you are not. I'm going to
let my light shine.
I'm going to be seen from space. This is true.
And excuse my cough there. I just choked on my Called2B coffee. And so sorry about that.
Okay, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Trish, how about you? How's the Christmas preparations going?
We are all decked out. We are actually having a competition in our neighborhood this year. And so I pulled out everything. And so kind of like Kevin, I don't want to be overdone. However, I will say there is a neighbor about 2 streets down who really does a beautiful job, and it's always my favorite house. And honestly, if they win, I will be really happy for them because I just love their lights. It's just so pretty. But I did deck out inside this year. So last year we did a bit of traveling. So it was very, very slim pickings for indoor decorations last year.
Right.
So this year I did everything, including the garland and lights around the top near the ceiling in the room with the ribbons and everything. And then the dogs tried to get in on the act and stole one of my gnomes and chewed him to bits. So I was very sad.
Mauled by dog.
Yes. So all of the soft toys are now on my mantle. So it really looks like Christmas threw up on my mantle.
Oh, okay.
Because,
oh my gosh.
There's not an inch available between the gnomes and the snowmen. There's a lot happening on the mantle this year.
See now, Trish, I don't know why, but when you said dogs, the first image that popped into my head was like a certain member of your comfort dog team dressed up as the Grinch, and Solomon as the poor little dog that the Grinch has, that he dresses up like a reindeer and has pulled the sled and all of those things. So I don't know, if you can make that happen, then I would recommend it. I would pay good money to see that. It could be a good fundraiser. Yeah. See the Grinch.
Always looking out for us, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, we just had our Solomon the Comfort Dog podcast, or the podcast, as we're calling it. So if you haven't seen that,
he looks great.
Yeah. Hey, so Trish, why don't you set the table for us? What we're
Sure.
going to focus on in this podcast?
Focus, yes. Back to the real reason we're here today is to talk about and begin a 4-part series on unlocking your kingdom potential. And today we're going to start by talking about living your strengths.
Yes, and this is the conclusion of our 4-part.
Oh, yes, it is. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. But if you want to start at the beginning, that podcast is available. So check that out.
Go start at the beginning.
That's right. That's start at the beginning, work through, and then come to today.
That's right. And
it'll make sense.
Yeah, what we're doing is we've been diving into our divine GPS, the gifts, passions, and strengths God has given as part of His workmanship and design. And with that understanding, what that not only means for us personally, but as we live out our calling to be a greater blessing in our everyday responsibilities of life. Before we dive into our topic, I just want to encourage our listening and viewing audience to not only listen and view, but share this podcast if you think somebody would be blessed by it. They're trying to understand how they've been gifted and what that means for their life. Also, too, we are really encouraging all of you to make sure to like and subscribe. That helps with the algorithms for the podcast so that others can find us and be blessed by this podcast as well. And we want to encourage you, keep listening and viewing until the end. We have a special Christmas offer that we want to offer all of you, our audience, for this holiday season. With that, let's dive into the topic. And I want to set the table talking about this idea of living your strengths with this. Imagine for a second, and maybe you've had this question, you go in for a job interview. And the interviewer asks you the question, what are your strengths? How would you respond to that?
I
would tell him my top 5 CliftonStrengths, Travis.
Well, hey, that's what we're aiming for here. Says
the achiever in the room.
Yeah, there is a way to begin to understand that maybe you've been stumped by that question before, and it's like, I don't know. We want to help you by diving in today, not only in living your strengths, but this idea we're going to dive specifically in the CliftonStrengths assessment that can help you that. But Trish, you were saying something.
I was going to say I probably would lean on what I know are my top 5 strengths, 2 of which are about relationship building and strategic thinking. And together they help build a path towards a future.
Yeah. So if any of you have been struggling, but what am I good at? I don't know how I would answer that question. What we want to do is help you through the lens of this assessment tool to understand that a little bit better. So as part of understanding our God-given workmanship and design, we're going to help understand the value of the CliftonStrengths assessment. By the way, you may have also heard of it as the Strengths Finder assessment. That was kind of the old iteration. A few years ago, Gallup rebranded this assessment as CliftonStrengths. Interchangeable. It's the same assessment. So StrengthsFinder, CliftonStrengths, same thing. But what it is, it's really not a strengths finder, but it's a talent finder. And then the idea is once you identify these natural God-given talents, that you can develop them and harness them and apply them as greater strengths to build a strengths-based life and to live them out in your various callings. But let's kind of think about this for a second. So there's a distinction that they make between a talent and a strength. How would you distinguish those two things?
I mean, I think that when you think about a talent, okay, it seems to me that that's something that you can do with a strength, or it's a way that you can apply a strength in a certain way. So you might say that somebody is a really talented guitar player, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have musicians far better than I who can gauge how good somebody is or how good somebody is not. But it might be a strength that they possess, i.e. maybe it's focus, right? That's one of the CliftonStrengths. Yes. And maybe that allows them to be a better guitar player because when they're in the moment and that's their focus, nothing else really matters. Or maybe it's the achiever in them that it makes them a really good guitar player. You could apply the same logic to, football or any other, just take any kind of skill that a person possesses, art, any of those things. And I think that the strengths that we possess can be applied in those certain ways. And it's kind of the way that the strengths are lived out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So from what you're saying, it's in whatever we're doing, it's not just the understanding and acknowledgement of you've got talents, but it's the application of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And which ones bubble up. So, and how do they become something that is a central strength for you that helps you achieve your goals?
Yeah. So here's how Gallup defines the two. But I think that, Kevin, you were onto something there. So Gallup would define a talent as the natural ways we think, feel, and behave in life. So it's how we naturally think about things. It's how we see the world around us. It's how we feel intrinsically. And with that, by the way, there's also values that are connected to that. So it's really just how God has wired you, the talents he's given to you. A strength is where you take those, you identify them, and you develop them where they become so natural, such a natural part of how you function in life in your various callings that you're actually not even aware of them. So this is where sometimes we can even see the things we do well and we kind of diminish them, thinking, well, anybody can do that. When in fact, it's like, no, not anybody can do that. You can do it because it's not just a talent, it's a strength. And so I kind of equate it as breathing. We all breathe, unless you've got pneumonia or lung infection, or you've worked out really hard or huffed up the stairs. Oftentimes we don't even think about breathing because it's just so natural to us. That's our talents when they are developed to such a level and applied to our life that it's like second nature to us.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the CliftonStrengths assessment. So basically what it measures for are 34 different talent themes or combinations of talents that are universal to all people. By the way, there are strengths movements, not just here in Canada, in the U.S. and Mexico, but Japan, Korea, Singapore, Africa, Europe, South America, Central America, because it's really just celebrating what we do naturally as part of God's workmanship. And so they identify these 34 different talent themes. Now, it doesn't measure for every talent, like musical talent, athletic talent. This doesn't measure for that. But these are talents that Gallup has identified that lead to people having success in life, being able to be effective in their callings, making a kingdom impact beyond themselves. And then each of the 34 different talents are broken up into 4 different domains. By the way, we're going to be putting this on the screen for our viewing audience, but all 34 different talents are put into these 4 different categories. There's your executing talents. These are the get-her-done talents. There are the influencing talents, your ability to influence others to think and to act. There's the relationship building talents. That's the can't we all just get along kind of talents, the glue that holds any group or team together. And then there's the strategic thinking talents, kind of these cognitive talents that help us to be able to analyze and find paths to move forward. So you both have taken your CliftonStrengths. What are your top 5, and where do they fall on these 4 domains of strengths?
Trish, you want to go first on this?
Sure. So I've taken it twice, and as Travis has graciously explained to us in the past, sometimes your top 5 can shift around just a little bit, but it typically remains the same 5, which holds true for me. So the number 1 and number 2 consistently have been learner and strategic, and they both fall under strategic thinking. And that was no surprise to me, because if you need to learn anything, if you need to have somebody research a product, you need to know anything about it,
Trisha's your girl.
Call me up. I'll let you know in about 2 hours, everything you need to know, from reviews to anything best about it, whatever. But I'm also, and before I took the CliftonStrengths, people used to ask me that one single question: what are your strengths? And my answer would always be, I like to live at the 20,000 foot view. I like to stand at the top and look down and really see the big picture and plan out. I think in 6-month and 1 year time chunks. I have
very much strategic thinking.
I have to remind myself to live in the moment.
Yes.
And so I was not surprised by either of those 2. The next 2, nice and orderly, as my CliftonStrengths are, fall under relationship building, and they are individualization and relator. And those are very strongly seen in my work and in my social life in trying to build relationships with people. I'm usually the one who's coordinating people to get them together. I see what their strengths are. I tend to see people not that life is a series of cookie cutters, but I can see different types of people and how they fit together.
That we're not all the same.
You're not the same, but you are. You know, there's so many things that tie people together that they don't realize.
Yeah.
And so I naturally see those things. And then my last one comes under executing, and that's responsibility. And that's just my overall sense of ownership of everything that I have under my purview.
Yeah. You know, back to the relationship building, the relator is going deep with people.
Yeah.
It's not wide in relationships, but it's deep. And then the individualization is the uniqueness of each person. Yep. And then that responsibility, taking psychological ownership. By the way, I always say with responsibility, somebody who has that in their top 5, they're almost offended if you check in on them because well, I said I would do that. You know?
Yes, don't really work well with a micromanager.
Yes.
But you know, what I was surprised though is my entire career has been built on writing and communication. And so I was really shocked to see that came in the second 5.
Communication?
Communication, yes, sorry. Communication came in the second 5, but it is so pervasive in everything I do. I can kind of understand why it was in the second 5, because it supports all 5 of my top 5. So it's really that foundation for everything else about me.
So how Gallup would kind of say this is your top 5, that's kind of like the best of who you are. That's like the cream on top, you know. And then the next 5, 6 through 10 is kind of your supporting talent themes. And that's, you also can see shifts. You were kind of alluding to this, is if you retake it. Now, I typically say the first time you take it is probably your truest self. But sometimes the reason for the shift is depending on the project we're working on. They're kind of like tools in a tool belt. You know, I always use a Phillips head screwdriver or IKEA. You buy something, you always use an Allen wrench, right? On every IKEA project. Yes. But there are some projects that I don't use a tool unless I'm specifically working on that project. And so that's where you may see some of those supporting themes come up into the top 5 on that take retake. Kevin, how about for you? What are your top 5 and where do they fall?
Yeah, so my experience with CliftonStrengths was really fascinating. And what I like about it is that when I took it, there was nothing that really came out that surprised me. You know, and it was kind of what you were alluding to earlier on, that it's kind of, some of these are so natural that it's like breathing. So and actually I was so fascinated by the process that I went and got all 34.
Oh, cool.
And that was pretty revealing as well. But for me, so number 1 is a achiever, and that is kind of your classic. Nobody's going to outwork me in the room.
Right.
My happiest days are the days that start with a giant, enormous list. And at the end of the day, the list is done.
Yep.
That makes me real happy. Number 2 is focus. That means that when I am focused on a project or a person or really anything, nothing else really exists. You know, I don't dim the lights around me. The lights are either on or off, and it's whatever it is that I'm doing in the moment, that's where my focus is.
So you're kind of like a heat-seeking missile.
Yes, that's a really good way to describe it. Number 3, futuristic, and I'm always thinking beyond where we are right now or where I am right now. I'm always looking at 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Strategic, I think, was number 4. That means I'm always asking, how do we get to this big giant dream that we're trying to dream up together? And then number 5 is a relator. And I kind of see that as really an extension of the focus part of my personality. It means that if I'm focused on you, you're the only person in the room at that point. If my focus is on you, whether it's a hospital visit or just interacting with a visitor out in the lobby or something like that. I mean, really nothing else exists if my focus is on you. So I'm really good in those kind of one-on-one situations. But what was really interesting is I looked at like the whole, the other, whatever it is, 29 strengths. Clearly math is not one of my Clifton strengths, but the other 29. Yeah, it was interesting because it's really like a smorgasbord. There isn't any one domain that kind of comes out on top over any of the others. It's just like, I mean, it is a conglomeration of like all of them, which in a sense kind of made me, I was happy to see that. And it's, you're right. I mean, your next five, I don't remember what those are for me off the top of my head. But that's when we get into like influencing land, as in really the next five and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I mean, it was really insightful. I think for me, really, really accurate. And as somebody who does a lot of management too, it's really good for building your team, because it can tell you, okay, we have a lot of we have a lot of executors, but we don't have a lot of strategic thinkers. We have a lot of doers, but we don't have a lot of how are we going to do, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's one of the things that, and why, by the way, we usually like to encourage people start with your top five, because what do you do when you get the full 34 list? Most people go to the bottom. Okay, what's wrong with me and how do I fix that?
So that was not a surprise either.
Oh, me neither.
And I know, not to, give away the surprise, but I know Travis Wu is one of yours, and it is at the bottom of my list. I always wanted to be a cheerleader, and I am not.
Yeah.
I try real hard.
It is my dead last. And
Wu
oh yeah,
so
it's
you're
my last
Wooless.
one. Yes, I'm Wooless. Well, my former mentor and boss, who's now our DP, was very high in the Woo category, and I always used to give him crap for that, because I'm like, you know what? Stop being like such a salesman. Okay, just like tell it like it is. I think that like either one of those personalities can be very good in management, but we manage in very different ways. Like the Woo person is going to make you like them, and therefore you're going to like the idea. Okay, that's what the Woo person does. And somebody like me, who's more of an achiever, more focused, more strategic, I'm going to build it in front of you, and then I'm going to say, like, let's go do it full speed ahead. And then if you're not full speed ahead, I'm going to say, why am I outrunning you? That kind of thing. So
see, and that's one of the things that from leadership, I think people have always been looking at what's the secret sauce of leadership. What qualities, what talents make an effective leader. And actually, Gallup, but also there's some Harvard Business Reviews that have really found that it's authentic leadership. It's knowing who you are. It's not trying to be somebody else, but it's utilizing what God has poured into you, developing it and applying it, and leading in your own unique way. But then I think, Kevin, what you talked about is realizing we need others on the team, because there's a myth of well-roundedness, that we can be good at everything. And the thing is you can't pour in what God hasn't put in. You can be who God has created and now redeemed you to be, but you can't be everything. And so what it does is to say, I found when I first took it, and I'll share mine in a second, but I found it was freeing, because it allowed me to say, hey, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I'm not good at.
It gives you the opportunity to step back and say, it's okay. It's okay that I'm not, the company cheerleader, even though, okay, my job is in public relations. We won't talk about that part, but I can use the tools and the skills that I have to support that, but I'm not the one who's going to go out there and be all excited and in the public space.
Yeah.
And that played out true as well as, when I used to do media interviews, that was not my favorite part of the job at all. I much preferred to be behind the scenes, making the plans, prepping other people to do that. Yeah.
So for you may have the responsibility, but then saying, I don't necessarily have to be the person in front of the camera who has that talent.
Yeah. And even, not to, well, maybe it's a little jab, but I think that you could apply this to just about any career. But of course, the one that I know is pastor, because that's what I do. And I think sometimes in our particular church body, we've made the mistake of kind of trying to cookie cut the pastor.
Yes.
To say, like, this is who the guy has to be. And the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of different kinds of people who can make really good pastors. And any one of those personality types could also be, frankly, an incompetent, jerk. It kind of depends on what you do with the gifts that you've been given. And so I think what makes more sense is, trying to hone those skills and trying to hone those strengths in a positive way, instead of saying, right, like every single pastor has to be the, visionary, instantly appealing, television host, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, no, like, yes, that guy can make a really effective pastor. That guy can also be a really bad pastor. But, I know one guy in particular, he's one of the best pastors I know, and he's not a visionary at all. And he admits that. He has people around him that are, but what he's really, really, really good at is he's uber strategic. Like, if you want a guy who, once he understands, okay, this is what the people around me want, this is the vision of the church, he's really good at making it happen. He knows how to do that part. Very, very strategic guy, right? So again, it's not this cookie cutter picture. Any one of your strengths can be an asset to the kingdom of God, and to me, that's freeing. That's freeing.
And that's what I discovered back in 2007 when I first took the CliftonStrengths as I was starting my journey as a coach. Boy, I got my top 5 talents, and I suddenly had words to describe and things I always knew about myself. I just couldn't communicate them to others. And so, like, my number 1 is in relationship building, includer. I always look for people on the outside and want to make them part of the inside. And I think that's part of my missional impulse. It's really tied into that. Then ideation is number 2 in strategic thinking. Strategic, number 3. So I've got more ideas than I know what to do with, and I can come up with strategies. I'll give you 3 strategies in 5 minutes. Give me 5 more minutes, I'll come up with 5 more. So it's kind of seeing all the potential paths to move forward. Connectedness is number 4 in relationship building. That's like the unseen spider webs of the relationships of people and events in life, that things don't happen by accidents. By the way, Gallup used to call that faith when they first developed it, but that didn't work in the business world so well, so they recalled it connectedness. And then the last one for me is futuristic, seeing that vision. And so for me, it was like, this really helped me. This is why I'm not really a shepherd teacher, hold your hand, good in hospital visits. I'd rather go out and do evangelism and further the kingdom, and to be able to see visions of that, strategies, including people, connecting people to Christ and to one another. That's where my sweet spot is. And Kevin, I think it's what you said. It gives you permission, or Tricia, that you can be who you are, and then find others who can make up what's lacking in you.
Well, and that's the most beautiful thing about the CliftonStrengths, is that if you know your strengths, it also helps you know your weaknesses. Yep. So if you find others who have your weaknesses as their strengths, and you build your team together, you will support each other in ways that you don't even know how it will help you. I can say that, I have been fortunate in my current job and my previous job to find someone who just happens to have very strong executing skills. I only have one top 5 strength in executing, but if I have someone on my team who's really that go-getter, like Kevin was talking about, someone who's a doer on my team, between the 2 of us, we can carry anything forward.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I was about to say too, so Trish has worked with me, and Travis too, maybe Trish a little bit more closely, in kind of a professional way, but Trish knows that Kevin Scott will always see the big picture. And Kevin Scott often sees 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What Kevin Scott does not see is 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. In fact, Kevin Scott gets very irritated by those things. And if there's too much talk or deliberation on those things, Kevin gets very frustrated, because then he thinks that we're not moving forward. Now, what I found is that as I've grown, I have to surround myself with those kinds of people. Amen. I really do. Yep. Even if at times I'm like, okay, really, like, do we really need to spend 5 hours deliberating this really insignificant little detail? Like, guys, just go figure this out and then come back and tell me what the plan is, that sort of thing. But it is important. I'm so big picture, so futuristic, so big picture focused, that I often miss the trap door that's right in front of me. And so I need people right out in front of me who do see those things. And I've come to really appreciate that. And now I make it a point actually to make sure that the people around me who are wired that way know that I do really appreciate their skill set, even if at times I might express a little bit of crankiness surrounding it, right? Because I want to see that forward movement, right? I need to, it's just you need to be surrounded by those who are strong where you are weak, because not everybody can say I'm an eye, or I'm an arm, or I'm a foot.
And I think you used the right word. When you start to think about when you know what your strengths are and you know what others are, there's this huge appreciation for understanding others, understanding yourself, and knowing how things come together.
Yeah.
And then when you look at your teams, I've done this with our comfort dog team, I've done this at work, and to look around and go, aha, now I know why.
Yes.
And
because that's the natural way you think, feel, and behave.
And you also know, no wonder I've been leaning on you for this or that. And it all makes sense.
Yeah. And this plays out not just in our service in the church or a workplace, even relationships in marriage. My wife and I, we used to see each other as very different, and there was some conflict that happened. But when we both took the CliftonStrengths, suddenly what seemed like differences were complementary. And so for me, what's amazing, God always knows the right person you need sometimes. My top are my wife's bottom, and my wife's top are my bottom. And so for me, Kevin, I'm like that. I'm that big picture person looking in the future. And I always felt like I brought these idea bubbles of the future to my wife. And I felt she always had this pin trying to pop my bubbles. And what I learned is that with her analytical, deliberative, discipline, focus, she helps take my ideas and refine them. If she can pop them, I need to go back to the drawing board because I didn't think through all the potential potholes and the outcomes. But now what I do is I lean on her. I bring my ideas saying, hey, hon, I know you're good at this. Help me to make this better. What am I missing here? And so we jokingly say, I'm looking at the future, and she's looking for the potholes where I could sprain my ankle, so. Hey, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was going to say I don't know what my wife's CliftonStrengths are because she hasn't taken it, but I could almost guarantee you that it's all relationships. I would almost guarantee you. And we had an experience pretty recently where we had to get our house set. We had a lot of stuff still in boxes. We had a lot of shelves that still needed to go up. We had furniture that needed to be assembled. It seemed like this great big insurmountable project. And so I said, okay, we're going to get this done. And here's how we're going to do it. And for like the first 2 days, she was so annoyed with me because I was just like, go, 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 go. Here's the next thing. Here's the next step. Here's the next step. We need a place for everything. Everything needs to be labeled here, 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 here. And then like by day 3 or 4, she's like, you know what? Thank you for being so annoying. Like, thank you. I really need this. And so, and likewise, I need to know that it's not always about the task, the job. Sometimes I need to know that it's okay to stop, and instead of being just a machine all the time, it's okay to be a human being once in a while.
Yeah.
We see that in our house too.
That.
My daughter and I complement each other very well. And like you said, there are times we get on each other's nerves because I'm sitting there trying to plan out, okay, these are all the things that we need to do and we need to be thinking about. And she's just like, no, let's just get it done. Come on. No, right now.
Yeah.
And she gets so focused on organizing her room or the house or something where she loses sight of other things we have to do. And I'm like, please stop. Yeah. And she's like, no, you need to finish. And so we've had to come to that agreement in together. So I know for a fact, if she were to take this quiz, or not quiz, but this survey, executing would be very high in her personality.
Oh, yeah.
Because
she's
just, gosh, she's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yep. Yeah, and what's wonderful is like my son, so ideation, I've got a lot of ideas. I don't always know how to put them into action or get them done. My son has Activator. He doesn't want to sit in a brainstorm room.
That's Emily.
He's like, basically, give me the idea, I'll make it happen. And so that's how we are better together. So, by the way, how do we take a talent, these God-given gifts of workmanship and design that we hear in Ephesians 2:10, how do we make them strengths in our life? So you can see this for our viewing audience on the screen. If you're listening, don't write this down while you're driving. Pull over, or when you get home, listen to this podcast again. I want to give you what's called the strengths equation. This is how you take a talent and you develop it as a strength in your life. So here's the equation. It's talent. So you take the assessment, you get the 5 words or the 10 words of the full 34 report. Focus on the top, not the bottom. So you take your talents, And then you add some knowledge, you add some skills, you add some experience, and you get a strength. Let me say that again. Talent plus knowledge plus skills plus experience equals a strength. How have you seen that play out with your strengths?
Going back to the writing, that is something that I've developed over my whole life. I can remember in elementary school having papers come back to me from my 6th grade teacher, and middle school as well, and really honing that skill, which then became more, you get more experience over time, and then you landed in a career where writing was everything.
Yeah.
So, and then it became the experience, the talent, the skill, all of it came together. And now I'm the sought out expert within the organization and my family. I get calls from mom and others. How do I write this?
Yeah. So talent that was identified early, and then as you've gone on in life, you've added to it, refined it, kind of worked it out like a muscle to make it a greater strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How about for you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, and I see it too, because, when from a very, very, very early age, I kind of had this understanding of, if you want something, you have to go get it. Nobody's going to give it to you. You have to go get it yourself. And I was pretty self-reliant pretty early on, and this attitude kind of developed in me that, I might not be the biggest guy in the room, I might not be the strongest guy in the room, but I'm the most tenacious. And I see that really with the achiever in me. It's again, I might not be necessarily the smartest guy in the room or the biggest or the strongest, but nobody's going to outwork me.
Yeah.
And so, that's it fleshes it. And then also, I mean, the focus too. I see that again as a little kid. I was a reader, and I used to read these big giant. I mean, I was reading classics at a pretty early age, because it was like, once I learned how to read, there was a whole world that was kind of unfolding in front of me. And I just kind of took it in. I was like a computer. I would just download these stories. And then, I mean, even today, it plays itself out in the way that I sermon prep, in the way that I, do a lot of things as a pastor. You can see it there too. So.
That's great. That's great. So let's think about, how do we understand this biblically? Because while this is more of a secular assessment tool, again, it's rooted in God's workmanship and design. It's what's universal to all people. What's interesting is, by the way, Gallup had a faith division when I first got trained by them. Unfortunately, kind of with new leadership, that faith division went away. But originally, they had a good understanding within the organization of how this is connected to God's workmanship and design, these God-given talents. But one of the passages that I really, when I think about strengths, are these words from 1 Peter 4, 10 through 11 that says, each one should use whatever gift they've received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. What I love about this passage is, typically when we think about God's grace, we think of God's love, forgiveness, salvation, life eternal, the greatest gift of grace, undeserved love that we receive. But our God-given talents are just as much gifts of God's grace, freely given to us. And so it says that whatever we've been given as his workmanship design, we're to faithfully administer, be good stewards of them in their various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do it speaking the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do it with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen. And what I love in this is that whatever we've been given, it's to love and serve others. It's not about, hey, look at how great I am. That's not why we focus on this. It's to identify, how's God gifted you with these gifts of God's grace? Now be good stewards by taking them, utilizing them in love and service to others. And in the process, we bring glory not to ourselves, but to God. Or as Jesus says, you're the light of the world. So how do we let our light shine? That others may see your good works and praise your Father in heaven.
Yeah, it's God knows what he's doing, and God takes care of us, and God takes care of his church, and he knows what his church needs, even if we don't always understand it. One of the things I've been doing in my own life recently is going back to some of these very familiar, well-known Bible stories and trying to see them with new eyes. And I just read, I was reading through the story of Moses, and it really did occur to me that the story of the burning bush is like the worst job interview ever. Okay. It's God saying, I have this amazing job for you. You're going to go be this leader. You're going to lead my people out of Egypt. You're going to go tell the most powerful man in the world to get his hands off my people. Go do it. And Moses immediately gives him all the reasons why he's not the guy for this. Okay. And I love the section where he says, I can't speak. You're asking me to speak boldly, and I'm not a good speaker,
I'm not so good with
and
the
God
words.
says, aha, but I've already thought of this. I know you're a bad speaker. That's why I've picked Aaron, who's a very good speaker, and he's going to meet you there, and he's going to speak for you. Now shut up and go do it. I love it because it's this idea that Moses obviously had a very defined set of skills, but there were things that he was not so good at. And so God knew what he was doing. He surrounded Moses with people like Aaron, with people like Jethro, his father-in-law, with people who were stronger in these areas to kind of prop Moses up.
Yeah, Jethro with administration,
God knew that was what Moses needed, and that was what his people needed. I love it. You can go all the way back to really the foundations of God's church, which is really Israel. And you can see, God knows what he's doing. He knows how to put this together. He's the master team builder.
Yeah. Well, and especially we think about like Romans 12, where we hear about the body of Christ, some are a hand, some are a foot, some are a mouth. I used to, for a long time before I understand how I was gifted, I thought it was just a big belly button. I didn't know why I was here. But, over time you understand and God reveals what your gifts are. But the thing is as a hand can't be a foot and a foot can't be a hand. You only can be the part that God has created and redeemed you to be. We're going to pause for a second. I had a camera go off. Give me 1 second.
We should both start humming the Jeopardy theme or do something obnoxious like that. Or we should sing our favorite Christmas carols. Trish, what is your favorite Christmas carol?
Oh, Holy Night.
That is a good one. I look forward to it every year.
We had.
I'm actually racking my brain right now because it's almost like I have the sacred music, like "O Come, Emmanuel" that I really, really like, and then I have like "Rocking Around the Christmas Tree" that I really, really like.
Hey, so as we've taken a look at the CliftonStrengths assessment, how it helps us understand our God-given talents, what do you see are the benefits for our listening and viewing audience taking this assessment? What was the benefit for you as you think about living out your calling?
Really, it's the aha moment of acknowledging and recognizing who you are, what your strengths are, and how they play out in your life. Because once you know that, as we said before, then you can find others to help support you because they will have your complementary strengths.
Yeah.
I could not have said it any better, actually. I would say the exact same thing. It tells you what you're good at. It helps show maybe not weaknesses, but areas where you could do some growing, and it teaches you what you need for support around you as you serve in the kingdom of God.
Yeah. Well, Kevin and Trish, thank you so much. And we appreciate you both being here for the Called2B podcast as we look at living your strengths. And we hope you both have a very Merry Christmas, a wonderful New Year. And we want to thank our viewing and listening audience. Thank you for joining us for this Called2B podcast. We hope that this conversation was a blessing for you. You have been gifted with a divine GPS. Gifts, passions, and as we talked about, strengths. And here's the Christmas offer we want to make to you. If you would like to find out what are your God-given talents and how to develop them into strengths, we're offering 10 complimentary top 5 CliftonStrengths assessments. Value is $20. We want to give it to you for free. And on top of that, a 1-hour strengths coaching session to help you to not only identify but to see how they play out in your life and how to harness them, develop them, and live them out in your daily callings. If you're interested, please email me at called2bpodcast@gmail.com. That's called2bpodcast@gmail.com. The first 10 people who email me by New Year's Eve, once we hit New Year's, the clock runs out, this deal is done. Reach out to me, email me, and those 10 top 5 CliftonStrengths assessments are yours, and we'll schedule a coaching session. As always, we want to thank Malem and the Southeastern District for their generous support that make this podcast possible. And with that, we want to wish you all God's blessings. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll catch you next time for the Called2B podcast. Take care, everybody.